Welcome to Humanist Views, a program where we look at current issues from a humanist point of view. I'm Scott Lohman. On tonight's program, we're going to take a look at some basic stuff for us, because we'll do a lot of look at various topics and different ideas, trying to get you involved in thinking about what's going on in the world. But sometimes we need to go back and look at the basics of just what humanism is. So on this program, we're going to do what we call Humanism 101. The American Humanist Association is our parent organization, and we're chartered through them with our group, the Humanists of Minnesota. And they put together this wonderful little card. I know you can't see it on the camera, but it's a nice little card, and on the back side, they spell out the basics of humanism. So what's really great about humanism is that we don't need a big, thick book that has lots of old stories in it to explain it. We can do it on the back of a double-sided business card. So we're going to take a look at that. And helping me do that on tonight's program is Dale Handeen. And Dale, welcome.
Thank you.
Dale is a board member of the Humanists of Minnesota, and she's also a Humanist Celebrant, and we'll discuss what that is a little later in the program. So you've been active in humanism for a long time, so what do you think of how they put this together?
Well, I think it's nicely written, and it's concise, and it's challenging and inspirational.
So it gets the job done. Okay, so we'll just start by reading off the definition, and then the other ones we'll have on the screen as we go through. And we've also put together two different books that will be a resource that we recommend. It's just two of many great books on humanism. So, humanism is a progressive philosophy of life that, without supernaturalism, affirms our ability and responsibility to lead ethical lives of personal fulfillment that aspire to the greater good of humanity. Now, in typical humanist form, that's full of big, long words in the first part, but it pretty much gets the job done, doesn't it?
Yes. Without supernaturalism, I think, is probably key.
Yep.
And then our own ability and responsibility to lead ethical lives, not turning to someone else to dictate what that entails.
Yeah, or as you know, like arriving on the planet and having to go find the instruction book. We have those capabilities within ourselves and the ability to work with others to come up with those experiences and rules and understandings.
Because we are in relationship. I mean, we're not doing this in isolation.
Correct.
Yes.
Yeah, human beings are social creatures, and those are some of the things that we'll go through. So we'll start working through. There are 6 basic tenets to humanism that are spelled out. This comes from the American Humanist Association, and you can find it, and it's a summary of what's called Humanist Manifesto 3. So you can find that on their website. And it says, here's a consensus of what we believe. The first point being, knowledge of the world is derived by observation, experimentation, and rational analysis. So that phrase pretty much covers science, and that we learn things by looking, experimenting, and then rational analysis. There was a book I read when my son arrived on the planet a while ago called The Scientist in the Crib. And it talks about how young babies aren't just doing things because, oh, that could be fun to drop that. Oh, it's more, let's see what happens when I drop that, and observe, start observing things that way. And, science is one of those tools that is just so practical for us, but it's also something that we need to work at.
Certainly. I wanted to share with you the simple fact that the Boston Women's Health Collective is celebrating now in October of this year the 40th anniversary of Our Bodies, Ourselves. That collective observed the need for a much better sexual education than was going on for young women and women of every age in our culture, and they met that need with the book, which has been adapted and rewritten and translated into many, many languages and is really around the world now. But they're celebrating 40 years, and they have asked if people would please come up with anecdotes or stories to share about the impact of the book in their lives and in their communities, and get that to the Boston Women's Health Collective. And I'd like to get that request out to any of our listeners who would be able to do that.
Yeah, I can do that, and they can find it by Googling, because we didn't put that on a resource. But the cool thing is, one, that book's 40, but also it should be much older than that, because, we've been dealing with parts of society that are scared by that part of our nature.
That's for sure.
And we can find both irrational and other parts of that. So, that's part of the scientific process, but yet it's something that we can learn from each other on that part of it. So, yeah, the science part is a good key part of how we get knowledge. We've learned how to put together computers from that sort of stuff. So it's taking our ability to observe things, and instead of just accepting those things that might be counterintuitive, learn to use our knowledge to figure out how that can work for us. And so science is something that many people find difficult, but it's the best tool we have as human beings to solve problems.
Most definitely.
Okay, so we'll move on to the next one then. And this one, humans are an integral part of nature, the result of unguided evolutionary change. And this also takes a look at the basics of biology, which is evolution, and that we're not something separate from the world, we're a component of the world. So we're a piece of the puzzle rather than something separate.
Yeah, and recently I've come from the annual meeting of the American Humanist Association, and one of the points that one of the presenters was making was that we are in fact not, as humans, perhaps at the pinnacle of all of
say, life, yes?
Yes, and that in fact, as a part of nature, all living things are related to one another, and maybe we need to rethink this idea of human beings being, the absolute.
Pinnacle thing, because we weren't what nature was aiming for. We're what happened as part of the process, and there were a number of steps along the way that it could have caused. If that meteor hadn't shown up 65 million years ago, there probably would have been intelligent lizard life related to the dinosaurs, as opposed to intelligent mammal life like us. There was the role of the meteor going by, but then evolution is the process. Puts together those beings that are able to survive and reproduce. But then we also have had a teaching by P.Z. Myers, came to our group recently, and we saw how that evolution is not just red tooth and claw. It's not always the battle of the survival of the fittest.
It's indeed about cooperation.
It's about cooperation, which is just so cool that we found out that cooperation goes back even to beings that have no clue they're actually cooperating. It just works.
Yeah.
Other things that you can add to that?
Well, it's just it's certainly a revelation,
It was.
Yeah, to know that cooperation is the best strategy.
Yeah, it's a better part, and it actually is integral as part of evolution in the process of getting to where humans evolved, and our cooperation continues. As we'll come into the next one, is that we are social animals on that. So evolution and the basic part, the fact that we're not separate, that we have only 3% genes different from the nearest set of great apes, should show that we're part of that. And then there are great books in science on where there's a fish part of us that's important, that came from way back that far in the evolutionary chain, that we still use as an integral part of how our bodies function. So great fun on that. Okay, moving on to the next one, is that ethical values are derived from human need and interest as tested by experience. So the thing we tend to get as atheists and humanists is, okay, where do you get your morals and your ethics? And that's what this goes, is that our values are derived from what we need as humans in order to cooperate and get along. Because they talk about, they saying, oh, the Ten Commandments are a brilliant way of setting that up. So like, yeah, the basic rules in there that you use, don't kill, don't steal, and basically those two are found in any society that's lasted for more than 10 minutes. Because you need those basic rules to say, okay, there's some stuff that's part of the community, and then there's some stuff that is part of, of yours, that you would do that, and we figure out those rules by interacting.
Yeah, the wisdom was in place before the documentation.
There you go, yeah. If we look at it in the computer process, it's like the documentation came later on that part of it. Yeah, so our rules are derived from that, because, another thing I liked is that when Fred Edwards, one of the great living humanists, was in town talking about, saying, well, all rules from society can be derived from the Bible. Okay, where do you find the take a right turn after a stop on a red light is permitted unless otherwise marked? There wasn't anything in that when they were putting it together that says rules of traffic and how we move in our society, because when you're moving millions of human beings around, you need rules like that. And a society that didn't have lots of cars and other stuff would not have known that this would be something that would be working. So when we look at those rules that we've come up with, some things have evolved from our needs in a society.
Certainly. You're pointing out that our rules or our patterns for living have to be updated and to respond to our ongoing developments.
Yeah, with that second part of it, human need and interest as tested by experience. So we find out which of those rules work. There are the reason that some traditions we continue to do is because they work. And sometimes you may look, well, why they come out, and sometimes we'll have to modify it as we go forward, but there are some traditions of, how families set up that work, but there are also ways when we're now allowing different ways of family forming where they can then set up their own rules.
And as we look at Scripture, we'll see rules that don't apply to present day and try to have an understanding historically of what they were about. They may have had perfect application there and then, but are no longer
aren't going to work in our society. Yeah. There's a number of rules on how the tribes existed and how they would deal with, bodily wastes from that time period, that it's like, no, that doesn't work in a city of 2 million people. You need to have different rules, because there would be things on that. And, the rules of cleanliness still apply. Washing your hands is a good thing, and that goes all the way back, and that's something we still can do. That's a rule that's been tested by time and experience. But a number of the rules regarding wearing two different pieces of,
the wool and
the wool and the
flax,
linen and the flax, and that doesn't make any sense. And when you deal with cleanliness, when it comes to food, as we've developed better modern storage methods and cleanliness of food, the rules they had back then for stuff that was going to spoil fast don't always apply for our modern equipment that we have for food storage.
Sure.
So those are a number of factors on that part of it. So, as we look forward, we get our ethics from being communal animals that learn. They notice that in infants, they already pick up a sense of fairness and understanding and how the rules work. And they're not asking questions that they can understand at that age, but they'll know if something is wrong with the young one next to them, or if maybe somebody got a turn out of place on that part of it, that we've evolved as communal animals.
Yes.
So, okay, on that part of it. So we'll move on to the next one. Life's fulfillment emerged from individual participation in the service of humane ideals. So that we don't just find our enjoyment in life, or we can find more of it in serving others and working with others. I know I find a great deal of joy in some of my volunteer activities, the things I don't get paid for, that they don't increase my net worth in the world. I get a joy in that. For a number of years, we took care of the little lady next door, and she's now passed on, but Some of that has helped her live a more fulfilling life and a longer life in doing that. But there was the mutual give and take of a society on that, and there's different things. So when you have those things, we can help each other. Another thing I do that falls under that is I am the coordinator for my company's blood drive. So I organize the dates for that. I set up the time with the place, and then I communicate out to my coworkers that they're coming on this date and sign up. So that is one thing that medical science hasn't been able to figure out how to replicate or duplicate in an artificial means. Blood is one of those things that we always need, and that the only place you can get it is from another human being. So what have you observed on as far as that and participation in society?
Well, I just want to mention the Science Award, Isaac Asimov Science Award recipient at the AHA annual meeting was Steve Wozniak, Silicon Valley icon and philanthropist for over 30 years. And he talked about, he designed the Apple's first line of products, Apple I and Apple II. And of course, he was very successful financially as a result of that. But he spent years as a volunteer mathematics teacher for elementary and junior high and high school students.
Oh, that's very cool.
Yeah. And he said he thought about being a person who has a happy day every day. That was his goal in life, to just be a happy person and have a happy day. And so he decided to do all kinds of volunteer activity that enabled him to do that.
Well, and then so the AHA has recognized him for that, as well as his other contributions to our society on that.
Yeah.
So we can find a number of things other than, when we go outside of those things we look at as being the basic part of our survival, making the money in our society that we need to keep a house over our heads and our cars running and groceries on the table and all of that stuff.
Yeah. But we also, if we can find a way to give and to volunteer, it's, of course, a very worthy activity.
Yes, so that's something that we can fit in that, and that those ideals when it comes to teaching our children and doing things like that are how we get pass those ideals on.
Isn't it true, Scott, that more and more young people that are finding their way to the Humanist Society and also the atheist student group are saying that they want to be doing, as humanists and as atheists, volunteer work as a identifiable group out in community?
Yep, we're seeing people that want to have us be known as a group that gives of its time and of its members in doing that. So we're working on those, even within a small group as our chapter is, to be able to provide that sort of stuff, because that is a way of giving back and helping our society run. You can do both the volunteering of helping other human beings, and it also keeps the gears rolling. Okay, we've got two more, so we'll move on to the next one, is that humans are social by nature and find meaning in relationships. And, you can see that just in our day in and day out interaction, and how social media, when we talk about that on the computers, is that people want to know what their friends are up to. This is why the websites of, say, Facebook and Twitter and those sort of things have people doing that. So trying to connect not just with your own little circle, but with greater part of humanity. But we also do find those relationships in close family, as well as in neighbors and coworkers and all of that.
Yes. There was something I wanted to mention earlier. I was able to speak with Jason Torpy, who is president of Military Association of Atheists and Freethinkers.
Okay.
And he was sharing with me that the largest group of religious preference in the military after Christian is non-religious.
Wow.
Yeah. and it's up to 25%.
Wow.
And yet, I think it was 67% of the chaplains are evangelical.
Yeah, there's an interesting mix going on in our military.
Well, there's a disconnect there because the evangelicals, the best that they have to offer is it comes as an imposition to the non-religious. And they may well be offering it with the best intentions, but it's not being well received by the non-religious. Meanwhile, what you're talking about this feeling of belonging and feeling of recognition among a group, those non-religious do indeed deserve the same kinds of support and community that is being offered through the chaplain services to the rest. And so there's a real need there that Jason is working to try to help meet.
Yeah, that's an important need, and we've got to go forward with that and let people know that there are non-believers out there and that we have as much to contribute doing it our way as they do doing it the religious way.
And it's helpful to think in terms of a belief system, and that helps to understand how it fits in that. Why do we speak of it in terms of religion when it's non-religious? Well, it's a belief system.
Yep, and a philosophy on that, going back to the term in the definition, and that we've even sometimes come to embrace the religious term, because Greg Epstein, whose book is a great resource called Good Without God, is the humanist chaplain at Harvard. So, of course, us being humanists, we go, well, what other word we can use? And we finally just said, oh, what the heck, we'll embrace that one, because it gets across sort of part of where we want to be is being an alternative to religion, but we're also a little different than that because we don't have the supernatural component, we don't have hardcore dogma, because when you look at what we've been talking about in this program, they're more like guidelines and principles as opposed to you need to believe that God is composed of X, Y, and Z and does that sort of thing, whereas we can identify with all of these ideals that are spelled out.
Humanism has all the components of a non-theistic religion.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, on that part of it. So we'll get down to the last one, then we've got some stuff we can talk about as we get to the end of the program. And the last one of the 6 is working to benefit society maximizes individual happiness. Again, we talked about that in one of the other ones on, fulfilling participation, but that you can find joy in working with others to maximize. Because, the one thing I've noticed is in being a parent is that babies go through certain things. And when I observed when my son was a 6-month-old, and I've seen that now in other babies, that 6-month-olds have figured out the power of a smile. What they like to do, 6-month-olds, I think, are the world's biggest flirts because they figured out they will lock eyes on somebody and then they will go. And they will notice that it's the rare person who does not smile on that. And then you can see it spread to them. And so they will do their best to lock eyes with every other human being in the room when they're in something to do that. So, sometimes happiness comes from just a smile, but it also comes from knowing that your fellow human beings are able to get through the day with a little less stress on that part of it. So some of the ideals we do is within our organization, we do a fundraiser for food shelves. And that's an important way that we can help some people get through the basic life stress and down economies and on that.
I wanted to share, some of us are in a place in life where we are working so, we're focusing so on daily living and survival on that level that maybe we don't feel that we're in a position to be doing a good deal of volunteering. Maybe our time constraints are enough that rules that out for present time. But there is an initiative that was begun in '91 in Canada after the Montreal massacre of women students in 1989. And this is called the White Ribbon Campaign. And it's something where men make a pledge that from this day forward, I will promise to be part of the solution in ending violence against women. And I would urge anyone who would like to make a significant effort in helping to improve our culture.
Yeah,
And if you're working at all with educating youth or for men of all ages, it's really, it may seem like it's only symbolic, but it would be a starting place.
Yeah.
And so that's the White Ribbon Campaign, and people can Google that.
Yeah, and that's a good thing to work with towards those things that are spelled out, in the working towards humane ideals, helping with the social part, and maximizing people's happiness on that. We've got 2 books that we're going to just recommend that we can that people can just check out. They're easy to get to. One is Good Without God by Greg Epstein, and the other book is called The Humanist Approach to Happiness by Jennifer Hancock. And both of those are humanists who have put together really just basic guides using the humanist principles that we've been talking about on this program, and they're spelled out in book form. Greg Epstein basically takes these concepts that we've talked about and talks about them throughout his whole book. Jennifer Hancock does the same thing, and the reason I like that is because we've got both the male and the female in that, and you can see that humanism is applied by both throughout the book in there, but you can also see sometimes there is a wee bit of a gender approach to it, but not that big a difference, that both of them look at it with practical information of using our philosophy to get through life, and that humanism is a practical way of life.
I must say, at the AHA annual meeting, the greatest vitality I encountered in any of the sessions was in one from the Secular Student Alliance, and there were 3 brilliant young women, one of whom was talking about the fact that in our movement we've been very good at being allies to GLBTQ individuals, and that it lies before us now to use everything we've learned in that endeavor to turn it to being the same kinds of allies to women and to a diversity of people of color.
Okay.
And that there's 2 reasons to do it, because it's the right thing to do, and also it's going to be the way that we really grow our movement.
That we really grow on that. Well, thank you for helping me do this program. Appreciate your help on this, Dale. It's great to go talk over the principles of humanism.
Thank you for having me, Scott.
You're
It was
welcome.
my pleasure.
And for more information on us, the Humanists of Minnesota, you can go to our website and you can find other editions of this program on there, as well as you can contact us. You can see about meetings we've got coming up, look at copies of our newsletter, and find out other things about humanism. You can also then, we'd also like to hear from you and what you think about this program. You can contact us through the website, or you can send us an old-fashioned letter in the mail, or you can contact us by phone. We'd like to hear what you think. Thank you for joining me on this edition of Humanist Views. I'm Scott Lohman. Good night.